Oh, hey folks, Jiminy Critic here. Glad you're with me today. I'm here to review a movie for you, a brand new movie coming out this weekend. I don't know whether to be excited or to be excited about warning you about this flick ahead of time. This new movie is called, and you probably heard of this from the trailers and previews on TV, it's called Hall Pass. That's right, the title makes you think back to your adolescent junior high days when you had to ask the teacher for a pass to leave the room for any reason, and she gave you a hall pass. In other words, you were free to go roam around the building and come back at a predestined time. This movie, believe me, kind of plays upon mostly male, junior high, adolescent, sophomoric humor kind of stuff that we all giggled and laughed about back in those days. This movie is brought to you by the Farrelly Brothers. Let me explain why that's important. If you know anything about them, they brought us such wonderful gifts as There's Something About Mary about a decade ago. That starred, if you remember, that had Cameron Diaz and Ben Stiller in it. Then they brought us a little later on Me, Myself, and Irene, starring Jim Carrey as the Rhode Island State Trooper who was a little bit mentally unstable. They're directing very funny comedy movies for the most part, but they always seem to insert some scenes in their movies, and Hall Pass is no different, that are just there to shock you and, wow, did I just see what I actually saw? Did those guys do that? And that's what they do here again in Hall Pass. So I want to forewarn you. This movie has an R rating, and if you're just offendable at all by things that most of us should be offended by, you're going to be offended in this movie. I want to warn you up front. There is humor, there's some laughs, and there's even a nice wrap-up to the story, which I'll get to in a second. The basic premise around Hall Pass is this. Owen Wilson and Jason Sudeikis are the two major stars of this movie, and they're married to Christina Applegate, and Jenna Fisher are their wives, and it's kind of like they're going through this. They're not even really midlife yet, but maybe young 30s. They've been married for a few years, and they're kind of acting bored with their marriages. And they talk out loud about, boy, remember the days when we were single, we were such studs, and we had a lot of women and this and that. And when they're out with their wives, they might be ogling or looking at women going by, and the wives know they're checking them out and slap them in the back of the head. What are you doing? That kind of thing. Well, they're just kind of restless and bored, don't realize how good they have it. The wives get together and come up with this thing. We're going to give our husbands a hall pass, a week off of marriage. Now, before you get all excited about that, think that could be a very detrimental thing, and it's not a good thing, but that's where the premise of this movie goes. These guys get a week off. Their wives kind of go away and say, you know what, you guys do whatever you want to do for this week. Get it out of your system. We'll come back and hope everything's better later. The thinking being reverse psychology. If we take away the taboo and the bad part of letting them fulfilling all their supposed fantasies, they're not going to know what to do with themselves, and that's just what happens to these guys. They talk a big game, but you know the story about the talkers. The talkers are never the doers. This movie shows you day by day with them and their buddies trying to make stuff happen that goes haywire, that goes crazy. There's some scenes inserted in this movie you'll be shocked by and laugh at. And the thing I thought was neat, when this week of a hall pass is over, these two guys both come to the realization that, you know what? I didn't realize how good I really had it at home with my wife, how much I actually love her and want to be with her the rest of my life. I mean, like, this comes out of nowhere in a movie like this, that both these guys realize I've got to do everything I can to make it right with this woman because I don't even deserve her as it is. And I thought that was kind of a cool ending to a movie that went off the rails. So if you can stand the Farrelly Brothers kind of movie, if you can stand this R-rated humor and get to a good ending, it made me kind of feel like watching The Shawshank Redemption, when the guy who was innocent in prison worked all those years to cut that hole, and he says in the narrative of the movie that he had to crawl through 1,000 feet, and he went through the tunnel, the excrement tunnel out of the prison into the river. I had to crawl through 1,000 feet of you-know-what to get out to freedom, and then he just stands there and lets the rain pour on him and clean him off. That's kind of how I felt getting through to the end of this movie. Hall Pass may or may not be for you. I'm going to leave that up to your decision, but it's out this weekend, and I'm sure it's going to have a couple of good weekends at the box office. Until next time, Jiminy Critic, and hopefully we'll talk about another fun movie the next time. I got to get back to work here, so excuse me for just a minute. Oh my word. I didn't want to tell the people about this, but there is a scene that takes place in the bathroom of this movie where there's just an explosion. That's it. I can't tell you anymore. I'm not going to say anymore. I'll go too far.